quickly say
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to
Homeschool
with Dusty Ket. Today we're talking about Grace Darling. Who's Grace Darling?
Don't know.
Neither do I. Okay.
Because it's not real.
Oh, okay. It's not weird. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Lunch and Learn. It's wonderful to have you all here. Come join us on Zoom with our live virtual studio audience. Got lovely people for you on here today, and it's going to be a lovely lunch and learn. Of course, you have to provide your own lunch, but that's what we've been doing for nearly a year now. So here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about the parasha, and then we're going to go. And actually, I was thinking I might share with you a little insight into Tu B'Shvat, which is next Thursday. And then we'll talk a little bit about Pirkei Avot. And then when I say a little bit, I mean a lot of it, because that will be the bulk of it. So, a little bit about Parshat Bo. Just two letters there, Bet and an Aleph, which we are famously taught has a gematria numerical value of 3, indicating to us the number of plagues that we have in this week's Parsha. We had 7 in last week's Parsha, and so this week we will be reading about the final 3 plagues, which were locusts, darkness, and the death of the firstborn. And just before the death of the firstborn, we read about the first ever mitzvah that was given to the Bnei Yisrael, to the children of Israel, which is the mitzvah of, anybody want to take a guess or tell us with great confidence what the first mitzvah is that was given?
In Eretz Israel?
Not in Eretz Israel, in Egypt. They are still in Egypt. They're about to be told to do their Korban Pesach, their Paschal lamb, and they are given before that one mitzvah, which is understood to be the first mitzvah commanded to the Jewish people in the Torah. And it is none other than the mitzvah of
the Jewish calendar.
The Jewish calendar, Rosh Chodesh, the new month. That is the. I'm just trying to find it in the book over here. Here we go.
Was the first mitzvah in the Torah.
Well, it wasn't commanded to the Jewish people.
Oh.
But yes, if you go through a wonderful book called Sefer HaChinuch, which means the book of our education. So the first mitzvah, it goes through every single parsha, and it lists the mitzvot that appear in those parshas. So it starts on Parashat Bereshit with Faru Uravu, be fruitful and multiply. In Parashat Lech Lecha, it will mention the mitzvah of Brit Milah. But these were not actually commanded to the Jewish people. This is the first mitzvah that was commanded to the Jewish people, and it was the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. Hashem said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be for you the first of the months of the year." And that is understood to be the first commandment, that the first mitzvah that the Jewish people are given. The concept of Rosh Chodesh, which, if you read the newsletter this week and you read Shira's Devar Torah, which she writes so studiously every single week, you will see a beautiful. I think I'm right in saying this, that this is what your piece is about. But if I'm not mistaken, Shira's piece this week is about the significance of Rosh Chodesh.
This is correct.
And why it is so amazing that this should be the first mitzvah that the Jewish people are given.
You're a lucky man, Rabbi. This is the first time I've heard a wife say to her husband, "You're correct."
It happens at least 10 times a day.
It's always "you're correct," but
even when you're right, you're wrong. So it's a wonderful.
There was a story once. When I'm out in the garden and I make a decision, am I still right or can I be wrong?
If you make a decision, no one's there to hear it. Have you really? So yes, there's a lovely message in this week's newsletter from Shira about Rosh Chodesh, and I shouldn't spoil it now, should I? No, let's encourage people to read the newsletter instead. Shira's like, no one reads the newsletter. Everyone reads the newsletter. So we have the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. We also have the commandment to to do the first Korban Pesach, the first Pesach offering, sacrifice. And this is amazing, really, because in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, when they would bring the Korban Pesach, so that's fine, that's understandable, that's a mitzvah. But this first time when they are bringing the Korban Pesach, we have to appreciate what they are being asked to do. Aside from putting the blood on the door lintels, if I've got those words right, to indicate the houses which need to be spared from the angel of death, they were also told a few days beforehand to take a lamb or a kid and to bring it into their homes and tie it to the bedpost before they would then slaughter it. We need to understand that the Egyptians worshipped these animals. And so there's layers and layers and so much to be said about this mitzvah of Korban Pesach. But just to kind of appreciate that what they were doing was saying to the Egyptian nation, you have to understand that Hashem runs the world, not these animals, not these idols, not these whatevers, not these gods that you think run the world, not these pharaohs. It's Hashem who runs the world. And so this is like very much a disregarding of what they may hold to be important and what they may hold to be divine. And they were taking these animals and demonstrating explicitly in front of their faces, you guys don't know what you're talking about. So it's quite an ambitious and bold thing that they're doing at this time. And then we have the death of the firstborn, followed by the exodus from Egypt, leaving Egypt, and everything that comes along with that. And finally, we have a mitzvah to remember the exodus. And there's so much to say on that as well. So many of our mitzvot are connected to the concept of remembering the exodus from Egypt. And we have the mitzvah of setting aside the firstborn of our livestock, which was a mitzvah that would take place in the times of the temple. And we have the mitzvah of tefillin, which is also mentioned in this week's parasha. But just to go back to this whole thing about remembering the exodus from Egypt, and why we have so many mitzvot that are associated to it. So one idea that I've just recalled, I wasn't planning to share this, but there we go. Hashem has put it into my mouth, or into my brain. It's about to be in my mouth. So if we picture the night of the Exodus, where you have got the Jewish people, they don't know exactly what's going on. It's a crazy time. They can hear everybody outside their doors, and they're screaming, and they're crying, and they're wailing, and there's huge panic and mass hysteria. As the angel of death works its way through Egypt, wiping out the firstborn. And one of the very interesting things that we're taught about the firstborn, the death of the firstborn, is that because Egypt was such a corrupt, morally bankrupt, and what's the word that I'm looking for? Not incest, unethical, but with regards to sexual promiscuity, is one of the things we're taught. They were very sexually promiscuous, and so one of the reasons why the death of the firstborn hit the Egyptians so substantially is because it attacked the firstborn children of the wives as well as the firstborn children of the men. So for anyone who had been guilty of infidelity, were finding that children were dying when perhaps they wouldn't have thought that they were actually their firstborns. And so part of the whole torture of this was waking up to the reality that that the sexual promiscuity had very wide ramifications when it came to killing off the firstborn. So anyway, we've got the Jewish people who are sitting there, and it's dark, and it's the middle of the night, and all of this mass hysteria is going on, and then all of a sudden they get this call that they are going to be leaving, that it is time for them to leave Egypt. And there's this moment, if we try and put ourselves in their minds, where they see very, very clearly that Hashem has chosen them. Hashem has chosen them to survive. Hashem has chosen them to escape. Hashem has chosen them to be a part of his beloved nation. And if we are to tap into that, thousands of years later and use the Exodus from Egypt as a benchmark for realizing that we are the descendants of people who were chosen to have this connection and this relationship with Hashem. That is supposed to motivate us, and that is supposed to be a constant reminder in our service of God, in our Jewish practice, in our adherence to Jewish values and Jewish mitzvah, which is that we have been chosen too. We are the descendants of people who were chosen, and what it means to be chosen, would have felt very different thousands of years ago to the way that it feels now. But that's why we have to tap into it. That's why we have to remind ourselves constantly and connect so many of the things that we do to the Exodus from Egypt, because it's supposed to give us a push forward, and it's supposed to motivate us, and it's supposed to empower us, and it's supposed to make us feel good and make us feel loved and make us feel chosen. So that's a little bit on Parashat Bo. Any questions on Parashat Bo? As long as it's not too theological and too go on, Paul.
I always had a little bit of a problem with the issue of the firstborn, regardless of guilt or anything else, just automatically all firstborn are killed.
Mm.
And I can get it that Pharaoh didn't let the people go, and that this was to show him that he had to let them go, etc., etc. And together with what you've just said, but I still have something of a problem that automatically I think of 6-month-old children who fundamentally I find difficulty in thinking that they were guilty of such a heinous crime that they should be automatically killed without reference to something that they'd done or their parents had done. But it was just, your firstborn, that's near enough, bye-bye. I just have a bit of a problem with that. I'm sure there's a good explanation for why, but I don't totally. The Hashem that I'm quite close to, I'm not sure that that's quite what I wanted to. Hey, let's just kill them all. 6 months, that's near enough.
One day, Paul, we will get into the depths of all of these stories and all of these episodes and all of the layers behind it. We will do.
Lovely.
But one thing we need to understand, and this is the nutshell answer, is that there are sources and there are commentaries that lay out for us the midah keneged midah, which is the Hebrew phrase for the direct, measured response to the atrocities that had been perpetrated against our people by the Egyptians.
Right.
And I can help you, point you in the direction of some of these books to read up on it. But these sources explain to us the measure for measure, the direct proportionate response as a punishment to the Egyptians for the atrocities and the torture and the pain that they put the Jewish people through. So the answer in a nutshell is that the plague of the firstborn, as well as the 9 plagues before that and everything else that was going on, was directly proportionate to things that had been done to the Jewish people.
Thank you.
Joy.
Just a small question. I think I may have read or heard somewhere that they were talking about boys when they talk about firstborn. Did that include girls as well?
I'm sure that's probably written in the Torah, and I just need to look it up. But in my brain as well, it seems to only be the boys. I don't believe it was the girls, but it's interesting. I don't know for certain. In my brain, it's only the boys, but
I think that was the firstborn males of the Hebrews.
It's an interesting question. In my brain, it's always been the boys, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it as boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a fair question. Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I couldn't be better with an answer. Apart from, I assume it was just the boys. Okay. So a little bit about Tu B'Shvat as well next week. Just one very, very small idea on Tu B'Shvat, which is the new year for the trees. And there's a famous question as to why we would celebrate the new year for the trees at a time when they're still a bit bare. Wouldn't it make more sense to celebrate the glory of creation and the bounty that we have in our world? Wouldn't it make more sense to do that when everything is out on the trees, when the leaves are back, when the fruit is plump and ripe and ready to be taken? And yet we don't. We do it when it's still very bare and desolate. And one of the answers that we're given is that underneath the surface, inside these tree trunks of all these trees, there's so much going on, there's so much churning away. You've got the sap that's starting to develop, that's ready to break through, which is the start of the process for rejuvenating the life on these trees and seeing everything blossom again. And so there's a very important message that we need to be able to learn as well, which is that we have so much potential inside of us. We have so much that we are ready to give, that we are bursting to give. We're ready to break through with ourselves. And so it's a wonderful time to be taking note and marking Tu Shvat, because it's supposed to give us that chizuk, and it's supposed to give us that chizuk and that motivation to realize just what we've all got inside of us, ready to burst through, ready to burst out as well. So that's a nice little insight, and we'll talk more about Tu B'Shvat next week as well. I'm also working on another lunchbox with Ashley to mark the special occasion. So watch this space, guys. And we'll do more on Tu B'Shvat next week. Okay, here we go. Pirkei Avot. I should probably get it up on the screen, shouldn't I? Everybody able to see that so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. Just need to get everything in the right places over here. Make sure that I can see you. Make sure that you can see me. That we've got that. Okay, very good. I'm going to get my notes as well. There we go. So, I am on Mishnah 10. The screen is on Mishnah 8. Oh, let's put you down there. No, let's not put you down there. Let's put you over here. Oh my goodness me, come on. Come on, technology, you can do better than this. Very good. All right, here we go. Mishnah 7 on the screen. Mishnah 10, maybe, if you've got it in a book. If you recall last week, we encountered Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Shmuel was telling us about withdrawing ourselves from judgment, staying out of it, trying to avoid conflict and the very negative impact that conflict can have. We talked a lot about it last week. And we also were pondering who it was talking to. Is it talking just about judges, or is it talking to each and every one of us? But this week we have got Mishnah 8. My apologies, Mishnah 8. Hu haya omer. We've got Rabbi Yishmael talking again, and this does seem to very much be talking to anyone really. And the words are Al tehi dan yechidi. Do not judge alone. She'ein dan yechidi ela echad. Do you know why? Because there's only one judge, and that is Hashem. Va'al tamar kablu da'ati. And do not tell people to accept your view. She'ein rashayin v'lo ata. Because they are free to think whatever they want, and it's not your place to insist that people think the way that you think. So those are the words of our Mishnah. Let's pause for a second so that people can chime in and say whatever they might want to say at this point. But we got David on today. Hello, David. Didn't notice you were on. Lovely to see you. We've got Nova as well.
I've just Googled
Twice.
the 10th plague, and you don't necessarily have to believe Google, but it says firstborn sons.
Right. I mean, that's certainly what my brain connects to.
Google agrees with you, Rabbi.
No, there we go. Then it must be true. Okay, so
I think this is wonderful. That's why we have 3 in a best din minimum.
Oh, very good.
One person can be very biased, and they need to hear the opinions of other people before they reach any form of judgment. We all judge too quickly each other, I suppose.
I mean,
it's a fault.
just to pick up on one thing that you said there. Yes, we do have a court system which has a minimum of 3 judges. And yes, fundamentally, it's important to hear the opinions of others. But actually, for the judges, it was important that they weren't swayed by other opinions. They were entitled to their own opinion. They were entitled to look at the case in the way that they saw fit. But the judgment was ruled by a verdict of a majority opinion. And actually, the way that I believe it was structured is that when the judges would issue their verdicts, it would always start with the most junior judge and work its way up to the senior. Because if you started with the senior judge first, then everybody underneath is going to think, oh gosh, maybe I haven't looked at it quite in the same way, and maybe I need to just give the same verdict as the more senior judge that comes before me. So actually, I believe the verdict went in the opposite direction. The youngest judge would issue their verdict first, and that way it wouldn't sway the more it wouldn't sway any of the other judges to think that they had to toe the party line, so to speak. It gave the flexibility for everybody to have their own opinions. And the other concept that you were saying was, going back to Martin.
No, that's all. I said that we all need to reflect and get other opinions before we form a judgment. My wife often says to me, no, think about that, and she's right.
Those are 2 words that you probably use quite often in the house. She's right.
What I find amazing and wonderful with a full bet din, if it's a death sentence and all the judges say he's guilty, then you must let him off.
Yeah.
Because his defence was so poor that nobody could speak up for him. So there must be a problem, and therefore let him off.
That's right. You can't even find one redeeming quality or one thing about the testimony that couldn't make this person an innocent person. Yeah, I also recall that. And actually, that principle I heard beautifully extended into the school setting, which was the principal of a school. His name, Rabbi Wallerstein. So he told his teachers, if you've got a student who is a couple of marks off the next grade up, find a reason. There must be something that you can find to give them those extra marks just to bump them up to the next grade, which I think is a kind of like similar policy. You're telling me you can't even find one redeeming quality, one redeeming factor about the work and the effort that they've put into this, that you can't just boost their self-esteem just that little bit by bumping them up to the next grade. We're not talking about critical exams, I imagine. We're talking about standard schoolwork. The idea of being able to find even one nugget of goodness, one nugget of something in each and every single person, I think is a very wonderful thing for us to be able to emulate.
In the workplace as well, my company had a policy. However, especially with apprentices, and some of them had no concept of the work they were doing, but you encourage them by finding something, by encouraging them with something, and amazing how that one little thing could boost them to do better in other fields.
Thank you. Do you want to show the millions of people on YouTube? No. So that's the thing. We never ever know just what the tiniest gesture of goodwill, of sympathy, of empathy, of we just never know what those small gestures will do for people and how it can lift a person completely out of whatever it is they might be going through. And we just thinking about it, we had a wonderful session last night with Luciana Berger, and just this concept of being able to lift people's mental health and just lift their self-esteem and lift their day, brighten their day. We just never have any idea what our tiny gestures that don't take anything out of us, and yet it can have the most profound impact on other people. Very important for us to remember. Okay, anyone else want to jump in?
Is it similar to just the last little bit about encouraging people? It's a bit like the carrot and the stick. People work so much better and achieve more by carrot, by positive rather than negative. Absolutely.
We all benefit. We all benefit from that. And it, it's interesting, this concept of don't tell people that they have to accept what your opinion is. I don't know, is that something that we really truly see in society today? Or do we kind of belittle and diminish and in some cases completely annihilate someone that doesn't have the same opinion as us? On social media and
blanketing people just because they don't agree with you. The universities even are. There's less and less discussion now, and people being refused. And yet there are levels at which we don't want people to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, the anti-vaxxers, for example.
It's an interesting, yes, now that you mention that, it is interesting because on the one hand, we can't tell people that they have to listen to our opinions, but on the other hand, if you legitimize everyone's opinion and everything is true, then it dilutes absolute truth, which with all of these things that we explore and examine, it's all about finding that balance, isn't it? On the one hand, we can't legitimize every opinion because really not every opinion is legitimate. If something is so completely sheker, so completely false, then we can't really allow those opinions to have the airtime that they might want, because actually it could be counterproductive and it could be very negative. So that's an interesting balance that we all have to reflect on and we all have to think about. But the concept of forcing people to accept our opinion, we have to always strive and aim to be in a society where people do have that freedom of speech. I'm reading Natan Sharansky at the moment, and he says that a free society, rather than a fair society, a free society is one where you can walk into the town square and say whatever it is that you want to say without the fear of arrest, without the fear of injury, without the fear of being attacked. And so it is strange on the one hand that we can't force people to listen to our opinions. We can't shut people down. We have to give people that freedom to speak. But on the other hand, we have to be careful not to give too much airtime, I guess, to things which are so completely antithetical to truth. So it's an interesting balance there, I think. But ultimately, I think there's the respect, isn't there? There's the respect for others, which is being encouraged here, which is being articulated as a hallmark of a Torah society, to allow others to think in their own way and to not have to force people to accept our opinion, to toe the party line, to declare loyalty to the state above all else. These are not Torah values. We take a much more respectful, healthier, and peaceful approach when it comes to to these kinds of things. You know, when people do have the ability to speak and share their opinions with you, it's not always a bad thing, because it forces us to listen to others. It forces us to challenge and to clarify and strengthen our own opinions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I thought the reports that he sent round last week from Rabbi YY, the talk that he gave from Paul sent round on this app, was most appropriate, where he says, you know, we all think differently, we all have different levels, and one is not more justifiable than the other, as long as it's done with love and care and not hatred.
Yeah.
But I was very impressed with that piece that Paul sent out last week.
I just realised, Joy, have I neglected to add you to the group?
Yeah, I was just writing a note on my whiteboard here saying, remind Rabbi Nick to put me on the app.
My sincerest apologies.
That's okay.
I'll leave a note for myself now.
All right. Can I ask if it's probably a bigger than an opinion, but proselytizing is one way of, you know, forcing people to have or not forcing, but making people change. And in the past, in history, and I'm sorry if I broaden this too much, when you had the Inquisition and everything, that's another way of, well, it just really shows how bad it is to force opinion. Yeah. And beliefs is different.
I think it's something that replays constantly throughout history. We've seen the bloodshed throughout history with the Crusades and all that, where you very much had to convert or die, and I think it replays now, and it resurfaces now in the liberal conversation, the liberal voice versus the right-wing voice, and how everyone's just shouting and everyone's just trying to blame each other and ruin each other's lives and ruin each other's careers, and actually it's not a healthy dialogue at all. The cancel culture, which we've referenced so many times on Lunch and Learn, this idea that again, if someone shares an abhorrent idea, it's one thing, but if someone says something which is politically incorrect, let's say, so everyone just jumps on it, and then before you know it, career's ruined, life is ruined. It's kind of the same idea. It's think the same as me or die. Not literally die, but we'll end you. You will be nothing. You will be a shadow of your former self unless you think the same things as us, unless you apologize, unless you, whatever microcosmic examples of this as they manifest itself. It's kind of the same idea. People who are trying to force a particular mindset, a particular way of looking at things, and not allowing the healthy conversation and dialogue to take place. There's a very interesting note that I came across when I was looking into this as well, and we're going to move on to another mission as well today. So they've got another twofer. But there was a quote, or an idea, I should say, from a rabbi called Rabbi Yaakov David of Amshinov, and he says that when you judge someone, you have to appreciate you're not only judging them, but there are people all around them who are going to be impacted, and you have to take them into account too. So, it's one thing if you are literally ruling on a legal dispute, but when you're in our own worlds of judging people and forming opinions and deciding how to treat other people, we have to realize that they're not just individuals on their own. They are connected to a whole host of people around them. And all of those people will get impacted by the way that you treat them. And that is why we're cautioned to remember that really only God can judge. He is the person, not person, he is the being who sees how everything is connected, and takes into account the true impact that it will have on everybody. Whereas we can't necessarily do that. We can say something nasty to someone and not realize the impact that will have on everybody associated with that individual. And a throwaway remark, a silly comment, a fleeting comment that we might have not meant any malice or animosity by, we might have just said something stupid. But we have to pay attention to the way that we talk to others, the way that we think about others, because we just never know what impact it's going to have on those around us. So that was another idea that resonated with me as well. Okie dokie. By the way, there was a recurring message when I was looking into this Mishnah as well, which is that even God doesn't judge alone. And there have been times throughout history in our sources which refer to this idea that Hashem takes counsel from his angels, whatever that might mean. We see it with regards to the flood. We see it with regards to making man, that actually these things, Hashem, whatever it might mean, he goes through some kind of consultation with his angels. So that's just an interesting thing as well. That it's even not only us that have to be careful not to judge alone, but even Hashem. We see examples where he has not judged alone. So it's just interesting. As I said, we have to tread carefully when talking about that, because ultimately the angels are all part of Hashem. He knows exactly what's going. All of the philosophical questions that come out of that could take us in a completely different tangent, but nonetheless the concept is there of consultation. All right, let's have a look at another Mishnah, guys, unless we've got other questions or comments. Okay, well, in that case, on the screen we are on Mishnah 9, and in my book I'm on Mishnah 11 with the words of Rabbi Yonatan. Anybody want to read the words? Hopefully the translation will serve us well. I know we always have this problem, but let's go. Anybody want to read it?
Rabbi Jonathan said, "Whoever fulfills the Torah out of a state of poverty, his end will be to fulfill it out of a state of wealth. And whoever discards the Torah out of a state of wealth, his end will be to discard it out of a state of poverty."
All right, so I'm not sure what that will do for us, but give it a moment to think about and ponder over. It is interesting. The translation on the screen helps us in some ways and doesn't help us in other ways. So it'll be interesting to see what people might come up with or come out with.
Well, I would have thought poverty in this sense means lack of knowledge. So,
Oh, wow! That's
Yeah.
that's an amazing point, which I did come across, but it definitely wasn't. It definitely wasn't the plain understanding, the simple understanding of it. So that's an amazing analysis. Go on. Let's just give him a chance to finish the sentence. 1 second, Mark.
Sounds wonderful on the
Wait, Martin. I didn't give him a chance to even finish his sentence. It just caught me off guard. Go on, Howard.
Oh, yeah, I beg your pardon.
so yes, if you people who fulfill it without knowing, but then they become full because they of the knowledge, so they fill it out of without knowing, and then his end will be to fulfill it out of the state of wealth. So you'll be wealthy in the knowledge and that you've actually been performing and learning the Torah. And whoever discards the Torah out of the state of wealth, so somebody who may already be knowledgeable but then decides to put it to one side and not to follow, his end will be to discard it out of a state of poverty, so he'll have nothing.
It's amazing because in the books I was reading, I found that insight almost as like a little, afterthought. When I read it, it really resonated with me and captured my attention. But it was almost like, or you could read it like this, and it's amazing that's what you jumped to. So kol hakavod to you. Martin, you wanted to come back on it.
Yeah, it makes wonderful sense and on the first part, but ends up a little bit difficult on the second part.
In what sense?
I can understand one who neglects, if you know enough and yet you still neglect the Torah. I'm not sure what it means that you will eventually get the Torah out of poverty. Does it mean you'll forget all the knowledge you had? Why would that necessarily be so? It doesn't.
It could do.
I think the first part's wonderful, and I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But I looked at it as though I wasn't quite sure, but one who feels ultimate, does it mean that if you are poor and you carry out Torah laws, you'll become wealthy? And if you're just doing it to look as though you're good and wealthy, then you'll end up in poverty. I don't know.
Yes, this was
that also doesn't make a lot of sense.
So this is why I said the translation on the screen may not help us, because most of what I was reading was understanding this Mishnah to not necessarily mean it in a causative way. What do I mean by that? If you read it in the English on the screen, whoever fulfills the Torah out of the state of poverty, his end will be. It almost makes it sound like, okay, if you're poor and you fulfill the Torah and you do the mitzvot, then Hashem will make you wealthy. Whereas if you ignore the Torah and don't do the mitzvot and you are blessed with great wealth, then you're going to end up poor. And that wasn't really where most of what I was reading was taking the theme of the Mishnah. And so I struggle with the way that it's been translated here for us on the screen, because it doesn't, what's the word? Observationally, it doesn't seem to ring true, because it doesn't, you have great tzaddikim who never end up fabulously wealthy, and you have people who
in this life or in the next life.
So that I think is definitely one of the ways. If we were to read it as a causative link, that tends to be the way that it's looked at. Yes.
Well, make it fair.
But if you try and look at the causative link in the physical sense, it doesn't seem to play out like that. And in fact, completely the opposite. You've got great tzaddikim and great rabbis and righteous people who throughout history have lived in a state of poverty. And some of our greatest sages and tzaddikim that we've turned to, they lived with barely any sense of physical luxury or wealth at all. So it's difficult to read it in a physical way from poverty to wealth, but I have seen it explained as a person who may be physically poor in this world will be extremely wealthy in the next world, as a causative result of having been loyal to the Torah. But certainly one of the simplest messages that emerges from this Mishnah seems to be that our loyalty to Torah has to be unconditional. If our attachment to Torah is only as a result of being put in a particularly favorable set of circumstances, then when those circumstances are taken away, there's very little left to hang on to. If we're only attached or loyal or fulfilling the Torah because of the society around us, because of the influence of our environment, because of our current financial situation, then when those circumstances change, the attachment can be severed. And you can have people who, when the going is easy, when life is easy, so they may have a particular level of faith, a particular level of practice, and then once that all goes, south, they may say, "Oh, I want nothing to do with this anymore," and they cast it all away. But if the relationship had been authentic, if the attachment had been deeper than just a result of our influences and our surroundings, then whatever a person gets faced with in life, they will nonetheless be able to ride that wave. and they will be able to face whatever challenges that may come their way. But if what we do is based on habit, based on the community that we're in, based on just doing it because it's what we do or it's what our parents did, then often it's not sustainable, and that is something that we've referred to on a number of occasions. That our practice and our values and the way that we live, it's got to be deeper than the surface level. Otherwise, it stands to be jeopardized by whatever we go through. And when it comes to transmitting it to the next generation, it often doesn't get passed on because it might have been only very superficial and might not have been done with the passion and the depth and the meaning and the energy to be able to inject that into those who come after us. So that's one of the big messages that I found comes out of this Mishnah. I'm interested to hear any other thoughts. I just realised I haven't actually really explained the words. I've just talked conceptually. So looking at the words, Kol hamakayim es haTorah me'oni, sof l'kayim me'osher. If a person is able to have an attachment to Hashem and to the Torah in a state where things are not going great, then when those tides may turn and they become wealthy in a physical sense, so their attachment of Torah will carry them through to that. Even in those better times, and they won't just say like, okay, I've got what I want now, I can do away with God. And that, by the way, is quite a hard thing, isn't it? Because there was a rabbi who once remarked to me that, you see people coming to shul when they need to pray for something, when something's going wrong. They need to pray for their business, they need to pray for a relative or whatever. But how many people come to shul when things are going right? You do a good business deal, and then you want to come and sponsor the kiddush because things have gone right, or you want to come and connect to Hashem and thank Him when things are going right. That there's often a bit of a skewed perspective there. When things are going hard, so then we know that we need to turn to Hashem. But when things are going well, then we sometimes lose sight and we lose focus of that. But the idea is that when things are going well, we should also understand that we want to turn to Hashem for that as well, and to thank Him for that bounty, and to thank Him for that blessing, and not just only our moments of oni, in our moments of poverty, in our moments of hardship, in our moments of strife. And then the Mishnah continues, V'chol hamavatel es haTorah me'osher. A person who discards their connection to Torah when things are going well, then how are we ever going to expect them to want to connect to God and connect to the Torah when things are going badly? We have to understand and build a framework in our lives around turning to Him when things are good and turning to Him when things are bad as well. Turning to Him when things are bad and turning to Him when things are good as well. That was where the as well belonged. So just some nuggets that come out of that Mishnah as well. Anyone got comments or questions? Have I put you all to sleep? Well, I've run out of things to say, and we're still 7 minutes off. So
Could say something if I can, but I don't know how much. It depends. For somebody who hasn't been brought up with Torah,
yes,
starting out loving the community and wanting to be part of it and going to shul and everything else, it isn't really like loving the Torah or being learned, but it does sink deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes more and more, and that's the sort of vein I wanted to say, because it's not always about studying.
Of course not.
It's about how everything is about around you and
yes,
how your environment affects you.
Mm-hmm. So are you disagreeing with something I said, or wanting me to rephrase a little bit of what I'm
yes,
saying?
in a way.
because I don't disagree with you. So it could be that maybe I phrased things in a way which was unclear or unfair or incorrect. So
I just think that you can come to Torah
yes,
not by knowledge and study, but by the environment, by going to shul, by children go to Jewish schools and things like that. And I don't know whether that's any less relevant and less important.
So I agree with you. I agree. It all plays a part. And I think the point that I was trying to make wasn't that we shouldn't be trying to connect to community or trying to connect in that way, but there is a difference, a qualitative absorption that comes from connecting to those things and having it impact you. When it impacts you and when it propels you, it's already going deeper than a superficial connection. And I think that was more what I was trying to bring out. That if someone just gets involved with the community and it's not really penetrating at all, then for someone like that, when something goes wrong, they'll detach and they'll become distant from it. But when it's a part of you, then even when things change, that will be the system that you tap into, because it's resonating and it's deeper. I think with what I was saying as well about being able to transmit that to the next generation, if it hasn't penetrated the next generation and it hasn't absorbed into the next generation, then however much we might want them to carry on with it, in a crude example, you will have people who go to shul with their parents, and then you have parents down the line who are frustrated that their children don't want to still go to shul after they've moved on and moved out. And perhaps that's because, whereas for the elder parent, the community, the shul experience has been something that has been absorbed and that they are passionate about and that they are connected to and that they are attached to, that never happened for the younger generation, for whatever reason. I think that's more where I was going for. I wasn't trying to belittle attachment to the community or belittle attachment through habit. It was more that it has to, we have to absorb it. It has to be a part of us. Otherwise, when the circumstances change, we just cast it aside, because it was never a part of our identity, really. It was just something that maybe we enjoyed, or something that we did out of guilt, or something that we did for whatever reason. But when it's a part of us, when it's a part of our identity, then whatever gets thrown our way, it won't shake us. That, by the way, is one of the other messages of trees. Going back to Tu B'Shvat, is that when your roots are extremely deep, then whatever wind may come your way, you're never going to be blown over. But if your roots are very shallow and superficial, then even the slightest breeze could topple you. So that's more where I was going with it. That our loyalty to Torah, our commitment to Torah, our relationship with Hashem, it has to be deep. It has to be a part of our identity, a part of who we are. Otherwise, it may not survive in the long term. That was more the message. But yeah, Paul, you're up close now. Didn't want to miss it. Okay, guys.
Not everybody can be a Torah scholar. There are many wonderful people who just are part of our Jewish life, observe some, if not all, the mitzvot, because they love to do that and they want to do it. And they do it out of habit. They do it because that's the tradition. That's what my father did. That's what my mother did.
Yeah.
And I, to my mind, they're as valid as as the Torah scholars who can and have the ability to learn and to remember and to. The important thing is to practice, to actually be part of. Surely,
I mean, I wasn't trying to say that loyal.
Best you can do.
I wasn't trying to say that loyalty and commitment to Torah and to God means that you're a Torah scholar. I'm saying each and every single person in their own way.
That's what you were saying, that you have to do the best you can do.
That's right.
You have to push yourself a little bit more all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like business. If you don't improve, you go backwards. But not everybody can be a Torah scholar. Not everybody has that ability to. God hasn't given everybody that brain. Unfortunately, most of us haven't got that ability. And the few who do have it are wonderful people who keep us on the straight and narrow.
You know,
Martin,
I think
Martin.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own potential,
Yes.
and it's for us to just strive to reach our own potential.
Yeah.
You know, I like to look at it in the well, I don't like to look at it in the following way, because what I'm about to say isn't a particularly flattering thing to say, but you can have people who, when they engage in whatever Jewish education or Torah study, whatever it might be, whatever they do, they are doing it because they're passionate and because they enjoy it, right? So somebody who only signs on to Lunch and Learn once a week, but they love it, and they're enthusiastic about it, and they're passionate about it, they might be, in an emotional sense, in a better place than someone who is sitting and learning Torah all day because they feel like they have to, and that's what society expects of them. But actually, it's a very sterile emotional experience. So, you know, you have people who may only find time once a week for learning Torah, and yet for them, it's incredibly more emotional and exciting and interesting and all of that than someone who might be doing things because, you know, they might be doing it all day, but they might not be connecting to it in an enthusiastic and emotional way. The final Mishnah in the book of in Kiddushin, which is one of the volumes of the Talmud. So it says that. Come on. One second. The words have just escaped me, but the idea is just so important and so powerful. The final Mishnah says that. Sorry, everyone. Give me a sec. Oh, come on. What is it? Thought it was in Kiddushin. Bear with me, guys. It's coming. Oh. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. Oh, where is it? Where's the words that I'm trying to find? It basically says that a person should make Torah his livelihood. Okay, I can't find the wording that I was looking for. He says, so Rabbi Nahorai said that he tried out all professions for his son, and he couldn't think of any better profession for his son than Torah. And somewhere else it says that Torah should be our livelihood. I thought it was in the same place. So the message that I remember learning several years ago was, you know, if we want to say that Torah should be our livelihood, then we should think that we all have to go and sit and learn Torah all day. But actually what it means is that a person could be working all day and be able to only allocate a small amount of time for studying Torah, and yet when they do that, that is what gives them the exhilaration. That's what they look forward to in their day, that bit of wisdom, that bit of injection, that bit of connection, that actually vitalizes, whatever the word is, but that's what gives them their their livelihood is the Torah. So they could be working all day and only have 5 minutes to spend reading or learning or connecting, but that's what they're living for. And meanwhile, you can have somebody who spends all day learning, but they can't wait to get out the place and grab a cup of coffee or go and play football, or go for a jog, whatever it might mean. And so even though they're spending their entire day learning or their entire day teaching Torah, actually what they're looking forward to is everything else. So the important thing is that our livelihood, the thing that makes us feel alive and connected and excited, that should be our Jewish learning in whatever shape and form it takes. And as Martin was saying, we just have to be honest and open and say, that's where I am. That's where I put myself on the relationship scale, whatever word you want to use, but that we are open to constantly pushing ourselves when appropriate. The relationship is only as strong as the person who wants it the least. So, Hashem loves us that much. How much do we love Hashem? That's the decision that only we can make for ourselves. So that's where we'll leave it for today. We'll wish everybody watching on YouTube a wonderful and meaningful day and a good Shabbos for when it comes. And do come and join us for the after party on Zoom. And for anyone who wants to sign on for Mincha at 1:15, we'll see you on Zoom as well for that. Take care, everyone.